we checked nasopharyngeal swabs using a very sensitive molecular test to see whether or not I had any virus infection, and I didn't.
Walk me through what happens when a coronavirus infects a person. It gets into a cell, it starts replicating itself. Tell me how that process works.
It gets into a cell, it releases its payload, it reproduces the genetic material. That genetic material is assembled inside of a protein coat using the machinery of the cell. It exits the cell, acquires an envelope, which is a cloak. It gets that characteristic appearance that we were talking about that looks, crown-like. That then attaches to another cell. The whole process repeats. In addition, this virus has the capacity to fuse cells. So it can actually move from one cell to another without going through this extracellular phase.
So that makes it a little bit faster.
It can make it even faster. And what it does then, in addition to damaging the airways directly, it induces immune responses. Those immune responses can be toxic. So the lung, which is basically a very thin layer of cells for gas exchange, so oxygen comes in and CO2 goes out, accumulates fluid, gets thicker, gets less pliable. The gas exchange becomes a problem. In addition, because you've got this infection, your body mounts an immune response, and there are all sorts of proteins called cytokines that begin to circulate that cause damage in their own right.
And when do I begin feeling something in this process?
Well, people vary. Some people don't feel anything. People have localized infection in the upper airways. They never progress to have pneumonia. It really is a question of how strong your immune system is, whether or not you have underlying lung disease or some other problem, cancer or diabetes that might impede the ability of the immune system to have an impact. And in other viral infections, not this one, because we haven't seen this one in the past, although SARS, interestingly, if you saw SARS, you might have some protection. It's not clear yet how people are protected if they've seen a previous coronavirus infection. But in some of these infections, you just have a very, very mild disease.
Now that the coronavirus is here in the United States, what should we be doing?
So because we don't have a vaccine, the only thing we really have is those kinds of things which are practical and frankly should be obvious. You're inside of a public conveyance. Do you really want to hold on with your bare hand onto a strap in a subway or a bus, whatever? Probably not. I wear a glove when I use the subway. Things that people don't think about as being contaminated, like the remote control when you go to a hotel. These things are never cleaned up. When I fly, I wipe down all surfaces.
Do you wipe it with alcohol, or does alcohol kill viruses?
I wipe it down with alcohol. And
what about a chlorine product?
Well, a chlorine product would work too, but it's quite smelly, and it would also bleach out whatever it is you touched.
But so a Purell or a hand sand that's alcohol-based,
one of those
tends to work against coronavirus?
60 to 70% alcohol works.
Mm-hmm.
And, is it 100%? No, nothing is 100%. So what we're talking about here is mitigation. That's what it's all. It's all about mitigation until such time as we have some sort of definitive approach to deal with this.
You are also an advisor to the movie Contagion, which is people should watch. It's somewhat relevant to today. Tell me your thought. Should we be shaking hands these days? What should we be doing?
Right now, all we really have is social distancing. It's not full isolation, but we find ways in which we minimize certain types of contact. In that film, there's a scene where the son of a CDC, maintenance worker gets his vaccine. And Lawrence Fishburne is having a conversation with this youngster. And they go to shake hands, and he says, "You ever know where this king came from?" And the idea was, in the Middle Ages, this is the way you showed that your sword arm was encumbered. You didn't have to worry, right? So this, unfortunately, means now that this is a potential threat. Why? Because people are continually touching their face, they're putting their hands in their nose, their mouth, other mucous membranes. So not only do I carry what's down here to myself and inoculate myself, but I then inoculate you. So some of these things that we do, which are, part of our social mores, I think we're going to have to forego for a while.
So in other words, you're saying, in an age of pandemics, and especially viral ones, we should just quit shaking hands.
We quit. Well, here's the thing I do. So I do this.
All right.
That works fine.
Okay, cool.
If you want to shake hands, otherwise I think a fist bump or an elbow bump or simply namaste, whatever you want to do, probably a safer approach.
How does this movie end?
And Contagion, as you know, it ended with the vaccine. Now, I don't think that this virus is ever going to disappear completely. I hope I'm wrong. I think it's with us to stay. It would not surprise me if a substantial proportion of the world's population ultimately became infected with this virus. And as new children come into the world, they're going to be susceptible. We've seen this with MERS coronavirus and camels. Frankly, they're not that different than humans. I mean, we're all animals. As new populations come in and can be infected, this is a challenge, just like with measles. Do I think we're going to lose the equivalent of the number of people we lost during the 1918 flu pandemic? No. That was a very different era. It's true that more people may become exposed more rapidly with this virus, but we have antibiotics to treat secondary infections. We understand more about how viruses are transmitted, and we will have a vaccine. And I'm confident that working together, pulling the world together in this fashion, and sharing information and sharing technologies, we will get to a vaccine in less than a year. We must get to a vaccine in less than a year.
Do you think in some ways there's a good to come out of this, which is the sharing of information, in some ways making information go viral for a good cause, and that this will bring the world or our country together in these troubled times?
There are a number of silver linings to this cloud. One, I think you've already alluded to. I think it's an opportunity for us to rally together behind science, politicians, and others who need to work together for a common purpose. The other thing is that internationally, we have an opportunity to realize the original goals of the international health regulations that were signed by every single nation state in the United Nations back in 2005. And the precepts there were every nation should be able to diagnose disease within its own borders, and everyone should be transparent in sharing those data. In 2003, China was incapable of doing what they did recently. They couldn't have solved these problems. They solved them, and they have shared us data in as close to real time as possible. It's been challenging to really follow the outbreak because the diagnostic methods have changed, so you want to know that you're comparing comparable data from day to day. But if they were not being transparent, they would have told us the numbers were going down long before they did. Everyone knows that there's no way to contain this kind of information anymore. You have to be transparent. So that also is good. And we have a program, which we're trying to build that includes various developing nations globally called Gideon. The idea there is that we're going to share data. We do this in peacetime, we do this in wartime, so that when there's a challenge, everybody has the infrastructure and the trust to be able to move forward collaboratively. This is absolutely critical. And the last thing I would say on that topic has to do with the wild animal markets. This virus came from wildlife. It was not a biological weapon. It was not something that was inadvertently released by somebody who was developing, biological weapons. This thing came from nature. And how did it come from nature? Because a wide range of things, and I'll mention climate change here because it's critical too. With climate change, we're seeing more and more people who are having food insecurity, who are eating wildlife. You're finding more mosquito-borne diseases. With the changes in temperature, certain types of mosquitoes, which were formerly restricted to the tropics, are now moving up into temperate zones. So you're seeing malaria moving further north. You're seeing Zika. So it's been one thing after another. We have to address these things. The easiest thing to do, that I've been pushing since 2003, and the Chinese government is now pushing this forward, is they're going to be eliminating these wild animal markets. No more pangolins, no more civets. No more bats. And it's not just China. This is all over Asia, it's all over Africa, and frankly, we've done some work at JFK where we have found people bringing in wild animals, and it's, finger pointing, is not productive. We all need to stop this.
And what can you and others in the scientific community do to make sure that if there's a vaccine, it'll be affordable for people?